Hello and welcome back. This is Trevor Crow. The show is Trevor and Friends. You're listening to WGCH here in Greenwich. The show is brought to you today by me, Trevor Crow. You can find me at trevorcrow.com, licensed marriage and family therapist. Be sure to find us on Substack, YouTube, and like us and follow. Now, today, I am absolutely delighted and thrilled to have Father James Martin on the show with me today. He is launched his book called, I think this is his fourth book, maybe third or fourth, Work in Progress. And Father James Martin, thank you for coming on the show with us.
My pleasure. Good to be back in Fairfield County.
Yes, well, you were here on Saturday even, right? Speaking to Christ Church, is that correct?
That's right. I was in Christchurch, but also I lived there between 1985 and 1988 in nearby Stamford before I entered the Jesuits.
We love that. It's a beautiful area. So, just a little background. Father Martin is highly charismatic. He has been interviewed on MSNBC, interviewed in the New York Times. It goes on and on. His ministry is really writing, but also supporting and advocating for all sorts of vulnerable peoples, including LGBTQ plus. And I just love your message. And before we jump into that, I just want to just a quick moment for the passing of Reverend Jesse Jackson. So, any thoughts on that?
Sure. I was a big fan of him, and I think what struck me when I saw the news today was just how long he's been working for civil rights and for social justice. Right alongside, I posted a picture of him and Dr. Martin Luther King. When you think about that time period, and to be, trying his best to work for social justice for the poor. We were talking beforehand about a clip that I saw where he's talking to a group of kids on Sesame Street with his message, I am somebody. So I really respect, I don't know every single thing he did. I don't know if I could have, kind of comment on every single thing he did, but the longevity of someone like that, whose life was really dedicated to civil rights, social justice, and the poor, is really admirable. So I have a great admiration for anyone in that line of work, and certainly a fellow religious. So I may he rest in peace.
Yes, may he rest in peace. So let's jump into your book, Work in Progress. Talk to us about it. And I love the list of jobs, and you describe all these jobs and how they impacted you.
Yeah, it's kind of two parts. They sort of overlap. Finding work in a variety of crazy summer jobs: busboy, dishwasher, usher, caddy, factory worker, all sorts of things, and then all the way through to working at General Electric on Long Ridge Road in Stamford in the 1980s, and then finding God later in the book when I enter the Jesuit priesthood. But the idea is really that God is at work in everybody's life, whether you're a busboy or a family therapist, right, or a Jesuit
Yes.
priest. So it's a mix of stories about kind of crazy, funny stories about growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and also a spiritual journal as well. So it works on lots of different levels.
I love it. Now, is there one specially favorite story of growing up that really resonates still to this day, close to your heart?
Yeah, well, lots of them. I was a bus boy at a
Mm-hmm.
place called the Ice Cream Inn, which was an ice cream place outside of Philadelphia, which is where I grew up. And I'll tell the story very quickly. This is the first chapter called How the Bicentennial Wagon Train Almost Got Me Fired. And the Bicentennial Wagon Train, which some people may remember, was coming through the United States, and it came through our hometown of Plymouth Meeting. And I came out into the restaurant floor and I noticed that all the tables were empty. And I thought, gosh, I guess I have to bust all these tables, right? So I bust all these tables. Well, it turned out that people came back. They were outside looking at the Bicentennial Wagon Train, right? And they came back and started screaming at me.
Oh,
And
no.
so, yes. And so it's kind of a crazy story and a silly story, but it's also a story about kind of learning how not to treat people because one of the patrons came back and just started screaming at me. And I'm a 15-year-old busboy. So it's a story about not only kind of a funny snafu that I made, but also, my standing there at age 15, with like wet dishes in my hand, saying to myself, when I grow up, I'm never going to treat somebody like this.
Yeah.
So lots of life lessons in the book, which I try to share with people.
That is so true, and I love that. And I think all of us, everybody should be somebody in the service industry at some point where you're waiting tables or bussing, et cetera. There's so much to be learned. And as a waitress, I was not particularly good, but I am a good tipper and I am nice to my servers
Well, I
because I
mean,
know.
that's actually a good lesson to learn, right? That
Hmm.
people who are maybe not as well off or, perhaps not as well educated really deserve to be treated with dignity, and they're working hard. I'm a big
Hmm.
tipper too, because you can see, and I work in Manhattan now, you can see how other people treat, waiters and wait staff, but also, sanitation workers and, subway employees. And so that's one of the things that I learned from the book, which is basically be kind to people and try to be generous.
Which just makes me think back to Reverend Jesse Jackson, which is I am. Right? That all of
Right.
us deserve dignity and appreciation and to be honored because we are each of us. So I was listening. You had a very interesting interview on MSNBC last night, and I went back and listened to it. And one of the things that struck me, because I'm not remembering who interviewed you, but she was concerned about the polarization out there and what's happened in our society. And and I loved what your response was. So could you tell the listeners today what your response was to that question?
Yeah, sure. So, Stephanie Rule was the one who asked the question, and she asked about how do we overcome that. And one of the techniques, I think, one of the practices, I should say, that the Jesuits are known for, I'm a Jesuit priest, is giving people the benefit of the doubt. And at the
Mm.
beginning of the spiritual exercises, which is a sort of a plan for a retreat that Saint Ignatius, our founder, wrote, he has what's called the presupposition. And it's very funny because you would think the presupposition would be, oh, say a Hail Mary or do this or do that, sort of read a scripture passage. But the presupposition is everyone should be more willing to put a good interpretation on another person's words and actions than a bad one. And if someone doesn't understand how someone intends it, they should ask him or her. And so that's his presupposition, his kind of fundamental way of dealing with people. We call it sometimes in the Jesuits giving people the plus sign. And it's kind of
Mhm.
hard. It's hard to do these days for people, but it's really important to say, I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume that they have good intentions. I'm going to assume that they're trying their best. And I think that's really important. And I know before the break you were mentioning, I think if you could share this with the audience,
Mhm.
how important that is for couples too. It's hugely important.
Absolutely, absolutely, deeply important. And I see it when couples that come to see me and they're really just at odds with each other, and if they've lost that benefit of the doubt, were they really assuming the intent of the other person is a negative? Oftentimes we have good intent, the effect, however, is negative, right? But it's really being able to step back and ask, what were you trying to accomplish with that, whatever that is? And what I love is the presupposition. I didn't realize this was connected back to Saint Ignatius because often, even when couples are stumbling and they can't really say what they're thinking, et cetera, I'll step in with a presupposition, which is, I'm betting you never wanted your wife to feel so much pain. Is that right?
That's
And you
really
say,
helpful.
oh, yeah, it gives a little bit of an open door. Absolutely. That was not my intent whatsoever. But that to me is truly one of the hardest things that we have to do in our most intimate relationships, but also out in the world, right?
Well, I heard someone once say, I think it was attributed to President George W. Bush, who
Mm.
said, I thought this was really insightful, that we expect other people to judge us on our intentions, but we judge other people on their actions.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so we really have to sort of think about what their intentions might be. It's especially important in terms of these times of political division, right, where people can barely talk to each other, to say, what are your intentions? What were you hoping to accomplish, as you were saying? But really, what are what motivates you? And then to really be able to meet people on that level. I participated in the synod in the Catholic Church
Mm.
and a couple of 2 years ago. And one of the comments was a quote from St. John Paul II, which was very helpful. And I think you'll appreciate this, which is affective collegiality precedes effective collegiality. So, in other
Interesting.
words, yeah, if we really want to sort of be collegial and listen to one another and talk about tough topics, we have to be friends,
Yeah,
right?
I
We
love
have to
that.
have that, yeah, we have to have that affective connection to people.
Can you explain what a synod is?
Yeah, it's a little complicated. It was It was a gathering of Catholic representatives from around the world, and we met for 2 sessions trying to make the Catholic Church more welcoming, more inclusive, and more participatory. So talking about all sorts of topics. And funny enough, this is a sort of an aside, but we sat at tables of 12 for either 1 week or 2 weeks. And in the second session in October 2024, my table of 12 was Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, which was interesting. The,
Interesting.
the future Pope Leo, right?
Leo, I'm kind of really digging Leo. I must say he's a favorite of mine right now. How are you feeling about
Well,
it?
I'm a huge fan, and
Uh-huh.
I knew him a little bit before the synod,
Uh-huh.
which was a lot of fun. And can I tell you a funny story?
Absolutely.
Uh, I was after the conclave, I was helping out ABC News with the conclave, and after the coverage ended at about 10 o'clock, it was such an exciting day. I went back to my Jesuit community. This is, right near St. Peter's Basilica, and I sort of exclaimed, "I can't believe it! He was at my table for 2 weeks," and they said, "No, you were at his table for 2 weeks."
I love that. So you have what worked in the Vatican. Is that correct? You were a Secretariat of Communication?
I'm a consultor. I don't work there. I have a very low level, sort of like a consultant from time
Uh-huh.
to time. But yeah,
Now, would you like to go back and do more with the Vatican?
that's up to Pope Leo and my Jesuit superiors. It's a lot of fun
Yes.
work. It's really exciting being there. The time and whenever I'm there, it's exciting. And I think, walking into a Vatican office or Vatican Hall, it never gets, for me, it never gets tiring. So, yeah, but that's something I could have, I mean, as we're talking about the book, I could have never imagined, when I was a young boy.
That is an incredible thing to move from the bicentennial train and drippy dishes to sitting at a table with the future pope. That's pretty cool.
That's a good point. Yeah, it was something of a journey, right?
That is very cool. So one of the things that I really love about what you've been talking about is sort of this moral duty we each have in challenging times. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you frame that up and how you explain that to people and what each person can do individually in this time?
Yeah, I frame it in terms of it coming from the gospel. So I'm a Christian and a Catholic priest and a Jesuit, of course. So it's all founded on the gospels and what Jesus asks us to do. Now, I know not everybody who might be listening is religious, but particularly for the Christian, Jesus asks us to care for the poor, to care for the sick, to care for the stranger, the migrant, the alien, the refugee. He's pretty clear about that. That's this consistent theme, living a life of love and mercy and compassion. So all the things that people should be familiar with. So I try to focus it on the Gospels without getting too political, but sometimes the Gospels have political implications, right? We don't set out to be political. For a person who might not be religious, I think it's being a moral person, and it's doing what you can do to be a moral person, to be a good person, to live according to, your ethics, your kind of code of ethics. But to your point about not having to do everything. One of the things I like to tell Christians or remind Christians is that when Jesus left Galilee and Judea, right, at the ascension after the resurrection, there were still some sick people there. So even he didn't heal everyone. You could say he healed people, sort of in terms of salvation, but physically he didn't heal every single person. And so what he did was essentially heal the people or preach to the people and work with the people in front of him. And we can always do that. So sometimes when we feel that the world is just too big for us and we don't know what we can do, we can take care and help the people in front of us and in our own
Mm.
communities as a way of starting out.
Yeah, so really focusing on your own community, looking to see what you can do. Um, I do think one of the parts of the polarization that's occurred here in this country recently is sort of it's me versus them. It's about my individual self versus the collective. I have to focus and protect and do whatever for me, myself, my family. Everybody else be damned. Um,
Yeah, and there's no sense of what we call in the Catholic Church the common good.
Common good, right?
That you are, it's not just about your taking and your flourishing or even just your rights. I mean, it's important. I'm not a political scientist, but we all have rights, but we also have responsibilities and duties to the community, to the common good. And especially if you are a Christian, right, or a religious person, this should be part of your worldview, right? So it's not just this zero-sum game of us and them or me and you.
Right.
It's supposed to be the community, right? It's what Martin Luther King, since we're talking about Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King called the beloved community, which I love.
Mm,
Everybody is welcomed and loved and valued, and everyone is really supported. And I really do think that we have lost that I have a
hmm.
responsibility to the common good, which is my brothers and sisters. And Jesus is all about this. Love thy neighbor is not just, love yourself and love your household. It's your neighbor too.
Yeah. And and this is a deep, maybe a naivete of my own belief of the world, which is people are ultimately good. I believe that most people are good. If they see somebody bleeding on the side of the road, they will stop and go to help, et cetera, et cetera. Now, but somehow it feels like that's fraying. It doesn't feel like that
I,
might be.
well, I think you're right. I think people are good, but I think they can also be fearful. And
Hmm.
fear infects us. There's a line in the New Testament which I love, which is perfect love drives out fear, which is beautiful. And if you think about it, if you get to know somebody and love them, you're not afraid of them, right? If you get to know a person who's homeless or a person who's a migrant or a person who's from another political stripe than you are, right? You get to know them, you can love them. Perfect love drives out fear. But I would say the same thing holds for the opposite. Perfect fear drives out love.
I like
And so
that.
if you are fearful of some category or stereotype of a person, it's harder for you to love them. And that really does a number on people. So I agree. I think people are naturally good. I mean, I really do believe that. But we're also flawed. I mean, that's part of human nature, and
Hmm.
parts of us are sinful, and we can give in to that fear and that which leads to the hatred.
Yeah, the fear is an incredible motivating factor that can really cause many of us to go down terrible rabbit holes without enough information and blame and shame and do a whole bunch of really negative things that, of course, we're all flawed humans. Um, but yes, if we move you know, the helicopter back up, maybe from Jesus's standpoint, and say, really, really, what can we do? How can we slow down and listen and hear the suffering, and just within your own community to approach and listen and learn. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about your talk, because I did see you speak at the Harper Club in New York City on Friday night, was the importance of stories. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it was Walter Brueggemann, who was the great Old Testament scholar, who said that arguments and debates sometimes close
Mhm.
our minds down and you become a little defensive, whereas stories open them up. And when you hear a story, or when even better, when you meet a person, it opens you up. I'll tell you a story. I interviewed on my own podcast called The Spiritual Life, Sister Norma Pimentel. And Sister Norma works with migrants at the border. She's been doing that for her whole life as a sister. And she told me the story about a Xerox salesman who came in to sell her a Xerox machine. And the woman said, Sister, I'm going to sell you this machine, but I totally disagree with what you're doing. And Sister Norma said, Well, let me show you our shelter. And she brought her through and saw, migrant mothers and mothers nursing their kids and kids playing and trying to have a good time. And at the end, the woman said, Sister, I support what you're doing 100%. And so I think so a story, now, if Sister Norma had sat there and said, Let me tell you why you should support migrants, it might have closed her down. And really, when Jesus is asked, we talked about helping our neighbor. When Jesus is asked, Who is my neighbor? He doesn't give them a PowerPoint presentation of 10 things that you should do this for your neighbor. This is what makes up a neighbor. He tells them the story of the Good Samaritan. So he's always telling the story to help people understand through the parables. And here's something that I found on retreat, which I found really interesting. So, I believe Jesus is the Son of God and fully human, fully divine. That Jesus, in a sense, is a story that God tells us to help us understand who God is. So the
Mm.
story of Jesus self-sacrificing and merciful and loving and, being risen from the dead is a kind of story of God. So yeah, stories open our minds up, and that's why the more we can know people's stories, the more we can encounter them one-on-one and hear their stories from them, the more it opens our heart.
Yeah, I fully understand that and appreciate that. And I see it even in therapy when my clients start going very intellectual and they will list dim bum 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 bum, this is what went wrong, da, da, da. It's very it's an intellectual approach to what's going off the rails, right? It's not until people drop down. And usually this is a somatic experience is really what are you feeling? And we spoke a little bit about fear, but we have, I think it's five basic feelings, right? Joy, happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, maybe. And these are universal feelings. Every human has these basic feelings. Now, there are nuances, and we have some languages that describe our feelings better. But it isn't until we tap into our feelings that we really truly relate to our other or anybody else, I believe. And I think that's where the story part, starts to truly resonate.
That's a great insight. I've never thought of that. That's really interesting that the stories really influence us on the feeling level. I think that's
Mhm.
really I'm getting an insight now that it bypasses in a sense or can at least amplify what we think, but it hits us on a feeling level. So if we see a migrant mother and her kids, we it might remind us of, our mother or our children, right? I don't have kids, but or some event like that, and it can stir the feeling. When Jesus would see people, the Gospels say that he was moved with pity often. And interestingly, in the Greek, the word is splanknon. It's a Greek word meaning his guts, his bowels. That's where the seat of emotions was back then.
Mm,
And so
mm.
he felt that vividly. And, that's what we're called to do, at least as Christians, and I think as moral people, to feel those feelings and that pity and that compassion and that sort of angst almost for people who are suffering.
Absolutely. So there's really good science now between MRI imaging and neurobiology and neuroscience. And we really know that the number one thing, our survival mechanism for our species on this planet, by the way, we're the invasive species on the planet, is emotional bonding, right?
That's
So you feel safe, secure, seen, heard, valued, and a sense of belonging. You are able to take in and be generous and open and have that heart that Jesus tells us to really feel the world through that. But when you're not in that place and you're anxious or you're avoidant, so there's a few attachment styles we cope with, and there's a disorganized attachment style. It's really hard to have that connection sometimes, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you're not in touch with your own feelings, that you can also be, in a sense, I found this just through therapy and spiritual direction. If you're not aware of them, they can blind you to what's happening, and you're sort of dominated by them without saying, "All right, I'm feeling anxious or fearful or frightened or worried or sad, and I need to attend to that in order that I can just, deal with people in an intelligent way." So if our feelings are always buried, I mean, you know this better than I do. You're the psychologist. That we really need to be able to understand them, and so, but also if we bury them, we're not going to feel that pity towards people that I think Jesus wants us to
Exactly.
feel.
Exactly. And again, I think that that's the divine process of connection and a, attachment can be considered a negative word, but that sense of feeling loved.
Yes, which is what Jesus came to show us.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have 2 minutes left, but I do believe that's why we're here. And I believe I got a chance to talk to you today. And because I got to meet you on Friday night, that this reconnecting with that divine important thought that we're here to love and be loved and feel loved. And I think part of our problem right now is many of us are having problems taking love in.
Yeah, I think taking love in and also giving love back. I think all of us want to be loved, but love itself, to love someone else is tough.
Yeah,
Dorothy Day, the Catholic social activist, used to like to quote Dostoevsky, who said that love in novels is really sweet and beautiful, but love in action, it's really tough, is a harsh and dreadful thing. Meaning it's tough, it's hard work, and so we
very
need to be,
scary.
yeah, we need to be aware of that, and but it's necessary, and eventually it's fulfilling and beautiful.
Beautiful. Well, Father Martin, I can't tell you how appreciative I am to have you on the show. I've let a little scratch in my throat now, right now, but could you tell everybody where they can find you, where to get your book?
Sure. So, Work in Progress, which is available in print, and
Pardon me.
ebook and audiobook is available, as they say, wherever books are sold. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, You go on the Harper Collins website. There's even a playlist on Spotify. So you can get it wherever the books are sold. You can follow me on social media on Instagram and Twitter at James Martin SJ, and I'm on Facebook at Father James Martin SJ, and I'm even on TikTok at James Martin SJ.
Love it. Keep it up. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for listening. Trevor Crow, Trevor and Friends, WGCH. We'll see you next week. Well done. Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure. That was so much fun. You're so good at this.
So interesting. I love talking to you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I lost my
not at all. I
clear
have
end out of
something
my
at,
little soda.
not at all. I have something at 1, but thank you very much.
Anytime you want to come on and talk to me, I'd love to
All right.
continue the conversation, and I love it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye.